So welcome to our session today. This is Stronger Together, a candid discussion about relationships and marriage pertaining to disability benefits. We'll be presenting today. Our interpreters already did a great job going through the process for getting interpretation set up if you do need to use any of those services. During the presentation, the various presenters, myself, Stephenie, and Nick will be monitoring the chat. So if you do have a question, please go ahead and put it in the chat function. We will have some time at the end where we'll be opening up the floor for discussion. So we'll take any questions then, but if you do have any technical issues or having any trouble hearing us, I'll be monitoring the chat to let anybody know if there are any difficulties. And if you are applying for continuing education credits with this presentation, please make sure that your full name is visible in your Zoom screen so we can make note of that. And that is everything we have to start for the housekeeping announcements. So Stephenie, I think we are ready to kick it off if you are.
Yep, ready to go. So, all right. As Nate said, I'm one of the presenters today. My name is Stephenie Milogic. To give you a little background on me, I am a fund development professional, and I also am a self-advocate and disability advocate. I am on the Wisconsin Board for People with Developmental Disabilities, and I have been married for over 3 years.
Hi, my name is Nekita. I also go by Nick. I use they, them, and he, him pronouns. I am an English major at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. I'm also a lived experience partner through the Wisconsin State Office of Children's Mental Health. I live with several chronic physical disabilities, as well as mental health conditions. I also am a huge activist in both the queer and disabled communities and the intersection where those meet.
And my name is Nathan Ruffolo. I'm from Appleton, Wisconsin. I am the sibling of a person with disabilities and the spouse of a person with disabilities. I've been a longtime advocate and currently serve on the Wisconsin Board for People with Developmental Disabilities along with Stephenie, as well as being employed as both a disability benefits specialist and now a vocational rehabilitation specialist with the Wisconsin DVR. And I have been married for almost 5 years now.
Sorry about that.
And so just for a brief introduction for everybody, what we're going to cover today in our session, we're going to go through some about all of our personal stories and lived experiences and how each of us have been impacted by disability, marriage, and relationships. We're going to talk a little bit about what some of the roadblocks and penalties are that we see in the current system for people with disabilities and marriage, workarounds and options to help mitigate and negate some of those penalties, as well as ways that you can create changes and opportunities to work on changing these things for future, as well as a time for you to ask questions. In your packet that you received in the mail, you should see a small postcard-like roadmap that'll go through, and we'll be kind of following that today. So you can always follow along on that postcard, help you track what we're talking about in the session today, as well as what we're going to be covering as we continue moving forward.
And with that, I will throw it over to Nick here to talk about his lived experience.
Hello. So my name is Nick, and I've got 2 partners, Anne, who is my long-term partner, who I have been with for over 5 years now, and Tyler, who is my shorter-term partner, who I've been with for a little over 7 months. And essentially, I am here to talk to you about polyamory and queerness and the intersection of my queerness and my disability. So I cannot get married for several reasons. The first one being that I cannot get married to multiple partners. It is a felony in 49 out of 50 states, and a misdemeanor in Utah. Same-sex marriage, myself being a trans man and my partners both also having the little F on their birth certificates, means that I was only able to marry my girlfriend as of 2015, as well as my boyfriend, because even though my girlfriend and I are a heterosexual couple, because I am trans and because I have female on my birth certificate, that is still legally considered a same-sex couple and would not have been able to get married until 2015 in all 50 states. What else do I have in my notes? I currently do not get any disability benefits, so I can't speak on that. But if anyone has any questions at the end for any part of polyamory, any part of being trans, any part of being queer and being in love, feel free to ask at the end. Stephenie, am I missing anything? Oh, you're muted.
I guess I missed that one. But no, I don't think so. I think that it's all about what you want to share and say. So that's great.
And then just a reminder for people in the chat, we'll be taking questions at the end.
But please continue to put them in. I'm keeping an eye on things and we track them as we go so we can make sure we circle back and get everybody's questions answered.
Yes, thank you, Nate.
Okay, so with that, I will share my story. As I said earlier, I've been married for just over 3 years, but the story of how that happened actually starts about 2 years before we got married. And I wish we kind of had a flashback effect because we'd have to go back in time here. But around that time, my now husband, Ben, and I have been dating for about 3.5 years and sort of hit a crossroads, and we're talking about our future together. And while we weighed our options, we came to the conclusion that it might be best if we were in a long-term committed relationship and just moved in together and kept going and seeing where life took us. And so that's where I thought the road was leading us, but little did I know then that he already had a ring. So let me see, in October of 2017, we got engaged. And soon after that, I started a class called Partners in Policymaking, which both of my co-presenters have also taken. And it helps people with disabilities and disability advocates learn how to talk to lawmakers and get involved in the legislative process. So a couple weeks after we got engaged, I started this class, and I wasn't really thinking anything of it. I had my engagement ring on, and a few of my classmates noticed the first session and said, "Well, congratulations, that's awesome." And by the second session, word had gotten around that Steph's engaged. Have you seen the ring? A lot of people with disabilities who were my classmates started coming up to me and going, "So you're engaged, right?" And I would say yes. And they would say, and you're on disability benefits, right? And I was like, well, yes. And all of a sudden, this very big pause would come with a really concerned face. And they would quickly backtrack and say, oh, don't get us wrong, don't get us wrong. We're really happy for you. We really, really are. But please, 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 please don't get married. And I was shocked. I was like, what? Why? And they said, because if you get married, you'll lose everything. And I was a little bit familiar with like the disability benefits penalties in marriage, but not, I wouldn't say well-versed. And so I went home and kind of started to panic a little bit and called my disability benefits specialist. Luckily, he's a very calm guy and doesn't panic easily. And so he just said, well, hang on, let me take a look. And he said, in most cases, what you've been told is correct, but not in yours. And here's where we need to go a little further back in time from before Ben and I got engaged, because earlier that year, due to a bonus I got at work, I got kicked off of my disability benefits. And I know it sounds terrible, but it actually had an unexpected silver lining. And what I didn't realize at the time was that having consistent employment allowed me to sign up for benefits in my own name when they took me through the reinstatement process. So basically, if you get kicked off benefits, don't panic, because there's a way through. It's just hard. But you can get back on, and things can work out. And while I was in that process, the person who was helping me said, well, it looks like you've been working quite a long time. Would you like to sign up for benefits in your own name? And I thought, sure, that's fine. What they didn't tell me is doing that saved my health insurance benefits for when I got married. And my work credits allowed me to keep a certain portion of the financial benefits. So while it still costs me money every month that I'm married to Ben, it doesn't cost me nearly what it would have. And it certainly doesn't cost me everything. And that's where I will leave it for now. But that's the kind of the nutshell of the story and how I got involved in disability advocacy and marriage advocacy. So, sorry about that.
And then for my story, I have been involved with disability advocacy for most of my life. I have a younger sibling that is a person with disabilities, and it's what helped start me on this process. Then in 2015, I was living in Illinois and met my future wife, Fabian, who often goes by Faye, because she was working with one of my coworkers. We had started dating, and shortly thereafter decided to date more seriously and eventually moved back to my home state here in Wisconsin, and decided that we wanted to get married. We got engaged in early 2016 and decided we were going to get married in 2017. We did so, and my wife and family got to know each other, and she got to know my sister, and became another caregiver for my sister as we go through this process. And then unbeknownst to us, my wife was diagnosed then in 2019 with bipolar disorder, which then placed her in the category of also being a person with disabilities. Now, in our circumstances, we've been able to continue to work through this, and my wife wasn't receiving benefits prior to her diagnosis with bipolar and was able to continue working, that she wasn't ever able to go on benefits or required to go on benefits prior to our marriage or after we were married. But seeing how difficult it could be for somebody with disabilities to be married and maintain their benefits got me more focused on this topic. And then eventually I did work with the same person that Stephenie was talking about as one of their coworkers for Outagamie County as a disability benefits specialist, which is what helped bring me into this world more and focus more on how disability benefits can be affected by work and marriage and the various things that somebody would go through in their day-to-day life.
I'm just gonna skip back through these. Sorry, you guys. All right.
And so now we're going to, I think, address a little bit about what some of the penalties and the difficulties are. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the penalties and the workarounds that we see. Certainly want to emphasize before we start this, some of it is going to be a little bit of a downer. We don't want you to come away from this process feeling though that it's all bad news and all downhill from here. There are certainly some difficulties that face us, if you are looking to be married and receive benefits, but the good news is there's always things that we can do and there's always people that are willing to help. And there's a lot of possibilities for us to help get through some of those difficulties and some of those penalties that we'll see.
Mm-hmm. So heading from that, let's start with some of the challenges that come with disability benefits and marriage. I found the three biggest barriers to getting married with a disability are that it's not talked about. Much like in my story, what you hear is, well, would you like to set up benefits under your own name? And you can say yes or no, but they don't really talk about the impact that has and the changes that it can make to your benefits or to your future planning. The second one is that these penalties really affect a large percentage of the disability community. And like Nathan said, some of it can be a bit of a downer because the workarounds don't work for everyone. And so I think going into it with kind of an open perspective and looking at all your options and not just focusing on getting married can sometimes be the best way to approach it until you know all of the ins and outs that go with it. And then the biggest challenge policy-wise is that representatives don't realize the penalties exist. And a lot of times you'll have a meeting with a representative and they'll go, "Are you sure that's true?" And you're sitting there, "Yeah, it's in the law." And they go and check the law and come back to you and are stunned. So getting the word out about it is another, definitely another hurdle, but it's doable. So now that we've looked at the challenges overall, let's take a closer look at those penalties.
Okay, and then for the penalties, we've broken it down into kind of the three primary categories. Somebody receiving SSI or supplemental security income and the penalties that you'll see, Ssdi or Social Security disability income and the penalties, and then the penalties that can affect you if you're receiving Medicare or Medicaid. And then we've got some information about some of the workarounds that exist in our current system. So first, for SSI is really where we see the most stringent penalties and the greatest difficulty for people when they are getting married, because if two people are getting married that are both receiving SSI, there is a 25% reduction in the amount of benefits that they would receive versus when they were receiving it as an individual. So when you do get married, you lose out on some of the benefit that you were receiving when they combine yourself and your spouse's income together. Now, if a person that's receiving SSI and a person that isn't receiving SSI get married, then they don't have that reduction automatically. But what happens is their spouse's income becomes available to be counted as their income through a process that they call deeming. So if somebody is receiving SSI and then their spouse is working or receives some other form of compensation, that money also becomes considered part of their spouse's income and can affect their ability to continue to receive benefits under the SSI program. And then, as you may know, with SSI, you also have an asset limit in addition to your income limit. For an individual, that asset limit is set at $2,000. When a couple gets married, they don't combine that asset limit. They increase it to only $3,000. So rather than having $4,000 with two people, it only becomes $3,000. So you do lose out on $1,000 of that asset limit that you would normally have available to you. And then lastly, something that people don't often realize or think about is that when they are deeming money, even if it's not your spouse's income, any type of financial compensation can be considered as income for that person. So wedding gifts, if they're in the form of cash or any sort of monetary gifts, can be deemed as income for those people that are getting married, and then can affect their ability to be eligible for SSI for that month or potentially months into the future. So it can present a wide variety of difficulties financially when someone with SSI is getting married, because there are so many ways that you can lose out on income or assets that would normally be available to you. Now, there are a couple of workarounds for SSI that can help reduce that. The biggest one is, as Stephenie had mentioned briefly before, a committed long-term relationship. If you are considering getting married, it's certainly a possibility to have a conversation with your partner about maintaining that same type of lifestyle and same type of commitment towards each other, but without going through the process of being married and then triggering those penalties that you would see. You can also, of course, look at establishing some of the alternate fund mechanisms like a trust or an ABLE account, ways that you can help put some money aside that doesn't count towards those SSI income and asset limits, that can help reduce the impact of those cash gifts if you are getting married, and just to help make it easier for you and your spouse to maintain your benefits. And then lastly, of course, is to make a marriage plan, to have a candid conversation with your spouse and your supporters to make sure that you are realistic about what your income will be affected, how it will be affected, and how you can make your relationship and your finances be successful during that time period. Now, for SSDI, the good news is the penalties are a little bit less stringent if you are receiving SSDI than they are for SSI. So there are two different categories within SSDI. If you are receiving those benefits based on your own work record, like Stephenie had mentioned in her case, then your benefits are not affected by your marriage. They are considered to be eligible for you to maintain those benefits, and they will not be affected. Now, if you are receiving those benefits based on what we call a childhood disability benefit, where you would be receiving that money from a parent's work record, then if your spouse also receives benefits, either SSI or SSDI, you won't be affected as well. The only time that you'd be affected is if you receive benefits from that childhood disability benefit and your spouse does not. And in that case, then you do lose your benefits outright. There is no income deeming. They just take the benefit away completely. So the workarounds for this are, like Stephenie did, if you are able to, getting the benefits in your own name. If you have been working and have the ability to place that as your own work record, then you don't have to worry about them affecting your benefits as you move forward. You can also, of course, as we mentioned before, go for a long-term committed relationship and continue to have those benefits without going through the legal institution of being married, but have that same commitment to your partner that you would if you were to be married. And then, of course, lastly, to make sure you plan carefully for your marriage and to make sure that the benefits, if you are going to lose any part of them, are something that you can be able to do and not be affected by negatively. And then lastly, for your medical benefits, there's both Medicare and Medicaid. For Medicare, if you are receiving it, it will not be affected by your disability benefits. If you are married, you will be able to maintain your Medicare throughout that time. Now, you can lose your Medicaid coverage when you get married in a couple of different ways. Mostly it would be by the deeming limit being exceeded, you could lose out on that benefit. And that would be if your asset or income has been lost. And then the biggest thing that sometimes is not considered with Medicaid is even if you are able to maintain Medicaid, if the person receiving benefits passes away, then there is a possibility that a lien can be placed on their spouse, where their spouse would then have to pay back the Medicaid system for money that was used during that time, and that would be assessed against the surviving spouse. So the workarounds for that are, of course, you can try to get yourself onto a Medicare benefit or some other type of benefit like an employer's to avoid having to work within the Medicaid system. Again, you can also set up additional trusts or other funding sources to help prevent that Medicaid lien or to help offset the cost of a lien if one does occur. And then, as we talked about before, having a long-term committed relationship and planning well prior to a marriage can also help negate some of those penalties. And with that, I'll throw it back over to you, Stephenie, for the next part.
Actually, I think this is Nick's.
I was gonna say, I thought if you want to take it, you can, but I am more than happy.
Go for it.
So there are definitely more possibilities than just being married. You can continue to date, either casually or more seriously. You can be in a committed relationship or relationships with whoever you were planning on getting married to, without getting any of the legal stuff involved. You can get engaged but not married. You can say like, this is my fiance. You could have a commitment ceremony where you have the big wedding party, but without any of the legal paperwork. And if you do want to get married, in order to make sure that your benefits are secure, you need to know how marriage affects your benefits. You need to make a plan that fits your needs long term, even if that does involve losing your benefits. And you need to get help from experts. Contact your disability services coordinator, contact your whatever Stephenie said earlier, the
Disability benefit specialist?
yes, disability benefit specialist. Contact the people who work on your case and are able to help you.
There we go. All right. I think what we decided with this one is, Nate, if you can cover the disability benefits side a little bit more. I can certainly cover the employment and benefits side.
Yep. So for some of the involved in making a plan, the things that we would suggest is, of course, like Stephenie talked about in her case, reach out to your local disability benefits specialist. If you haven't already been in touch with them in the past, reach out to your local aging and disability resource center. Every county in the state of Wisconsin has at least one disability benefits specialist working in the county, and that is what they are there to provide assistance towards, is helping plan for benefits, helping you get in touch with agencies and other partners that can help you. So they are always a great resource to start off with, as they're going to really be able to help you navigate the complexities of the social security system, of the benefits system, and to help you lay down the foundations of the plan. They may also have you work with other folks or be able to provide you the service themselves as far as getting a benefits assessment to help you really determine, how much you're bringing in every month, what you can afford to do without, what you can't afford to do without, to make sure that when you do decide to go ahead and get married, you have everything laid out that you can enjoy the start of your new marriage and not be worrying about your finances and have that all figured out, or to find out if maybe a committed long-term relationship is the right answer for you, what you can or cannot do to make sure that your benefits are going to meet your needs as you continue forward. And then, of course, to just make sure that you stay up to date, both with your local representatives and your benefits specialists, as to how the process of SSI and other benefits are evolving. Those numbers can change on a regular basis. There can be cost of living adjustments. And of course, there's always the possibility, and we hope that there will be changes to the SSI system to help increase some of those limits as we go forward. So, maintaining that contact, maintaining that advocacy to make sure that you know what is going on and how your benefits can be affected on a regular basis is important to making sure your plan is successful. I'll hand it back over to you, Stephenie.
All right. So it really does depend on what kind of benefits you receive and how you receive them. I can't stress that enough, because the penalties are different just depending on what camp you fall in. So for me, employment and accruing or getting work credits was essential in being able to save a good portion of my benefits. And I wish they talked a little bit more about this outright, but knowing where you are with your employment can help you make a timeline and a budget when it comes to actual planning for where you want to go in your future. So if you see marriage in your future, or you want that option, make sure that if you are working, you are tracking those credits, and your disability benefit specialist can help with this too. So I would agree with Nate and echo that staying in contact with your disability benefit specialist or your support team is important. And the second part of it comes down to, if you are working, putting those benefits in your own name as soon as possible. Now, what ends up happening with that, it doesn't mean that if you're not married and you're receiving the childhood disability benefit, you do not lose that benefit before you are married. So what it means is that you would get 2 checks, one from the childhood disability benefit and one from your own work credit. So I want to make sure you don't think you're going to lose your benefits immediately by putting them in your own name. And I always say, with anything that you want to do with the disability, there's always an extra layer of planning that goes into it. And the same is true with the marriage plan. And it might take the wind out of your sails for a little bit to sit down and actually have to make a budget and say, hey, can we afford to do this? How does this affect the timeline? But it's a really, really, really valuable thing to take the time to do. And that joy of getting married comes back. So it's not like it's going to be a downer from there out. No, it's just an extra step. So take the time it takes to put that budget together and make sure that you can be financially stable from that point on together with your spouse. It made a big difference for Ben and I, because we did have to make that decision and decide, what can we afford? So I think that covers it. Did I miss anything, Nate?
No, I think that's great, Stephenie.
All right. So now we're going to get into the more advocacy-driven work that we're doing. Nate mentioned earlier that we are hoping that changes are coming to the benefit system. And as you can see on the screen, this is from a virtual meeting we had with our Representative Gallagher. He's at the bottom left. And we were talking about how you can support people with disabilities in the community. And so this is part of that work, getting up in front of representatives and telling them what's important to you as a person with a disability or a disability advocate. Would you like to say anything additional, Nate or Nick?
No, I think that's great, Stephenie. You just really emphasize, search for ways and search for times that you can get out in front of your representatives, because as Stephenie did a great job demonstrating at the start of the presentation, a lot of times they don't really know or even understand where these benefits are and how they affect people and how much of an impact these things can make. And bringing that awareness to them is vitally important to making sure that change is something that can happen in the future. So we really encourage folks to get involved, to reach out to their representatives, contact the board for people with developmental disabilities if you want assistance. Partners in policymaking, if you haven't taken the class, is a great time and great way to learn more about being an active participant in the legislative system and the legislative process, and would certainly encourage anybody that's interested to get in touch and to look for opportunities to work with them.
All right. And just to be clear, we are working and hoping to eventually get those marriage penalties eliminated. It's complicated work, but we're hoping to see that happen one day, so that you don't have to go through making these kinds of decisions. We're just not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Nick, can you help tell people how to get the message out?
Of course. So the best way to get the message out is talk about how important relationships are to everyone's life, disability or no disability. Marriage is not currently possible for everyone, but one day it can be. And just help inform others about relationships and marriage and what kind of relationship you have, and what kind of relationships the people in your lives have. Advocate to end marriage penalties. Ask your representatives to support the SSI Restoration Act, the Social Security 2100 Act, and other disability rights legislations. To contact your state representative, call the legislative hotline at this number or click Who Are My Legislators on the Wisconsin State Legislature homepage.
All right, and with that, we'll open it up for questions.
Okay, and then I have the chat here. So we have a couple of questions in the chat. We'll go through those first, and then if there's other ones that come in, we can circle back to those. So the first question in the chat is for you, Nick, from Andrea. She was asking if you have been made fun of or had any experiences from that for being transgender.
Definitely. I have I guess in my personal experience, the experience that comes to mind, it's less about being made fun of and more about not being respected. Is mostly actually with my girlfriend's family, surrounding pronouns, name usage. I've definitely had people just assume that my full name is Nicole instead of Nekita, because I actually didn't change my name, but they hear that I am trans and just automatically think, Nick is short for Nicole, that's a girl's name. the one instance that I can think of surrounding Anne's family, and I have permission to share this story, is when her dad found out that I was trans, and he told her that how can you say that you're a lesbian when you are dating a girl who pretends to be a boy? And that really hit hard. And he is, you know, no longer with us. He passed away a couple of years ago, but I never really got over that. That wanting to, you know, the stereotypical, the son-in-law goes and asks the dad for her hand in marriage. I knew that that would never have been accepted. But yeah, again, it's not really making fun of so much as like the disrespect and just plain being mean and closed-minded.
Thank you, Nick. Next question from Carrie, asking about when a young adult with a disability who receives benefits under a parent's record who is retired, how that would affect their benefits if they're married. So that is the unfortunate situation we talked about with the childhood disability benefits. So that is the one area within Social Security disability income that if you are receiving benefits based on a parent's record because they are retired, then you get married, you do lose those benefits outright at that point. That's where if you're able to switch over to your own benefits under your own work credits, you can avoid that. But if it is a benefit provided based on your parent's work record, then you do lose that benefit. Next question, I think will probably be for you, Stephenie, from Ssdi, asking for updates on the SSI Restoration Act. Since if that would to be passed, it would eliminate the marriage penalties altogether.
Well, okay. Last I heard, and I will check with some advocates on this as well, but last I heard, they had a hearing about it in mid-September, I think. And while it did go to hearing, they did not move forward with it during this session. So what we're probably looking at is reintroducing it the next session and trying to get that hearing again, and then trying to get co-sponsors and word out about the bill. And I know they have some hesitations and reservations about it because it's not just a bill to eliminate the marriage penalty for SSI recipients. That's part of it, but it does also look at the wage limits and asset structures and things. And so I think they're a little bit hesitant to open that up, but we are trying to encourage them that, you know what, those wage limits and asset limits have not been looked at since the 70s. It's time for that to be updated. It's time for the disability marriage penalties to be eliminated. And my hope is that if they can do it for SSI, that sets the bar, and they can do it also for SSDI. But I will keep you posted, Ssdi, because yeah, it's still in process. So we'll see what happens. But my hope is that it gets reintroduced next session.
Okay, and then the last question we have here from Carrie was asking if someone begins receiving SSI benefits for the first time at age 18, would that benefit then be under their own name? And in this case, yes, the benefit would be under your own name if you were receiving SSI at age 18, Carrie. You would be affected by those penalties we talked about with SSI, such as the income reduction, the asset limit reduction, the deeming penalties, but it is under your own name, so you don't have that outright loss risk the way you do with a benefit from a retired parent. And then we have a couple of things here from Brittany and from Carrie, both saying great presentation. So thank you, everybody. We appreciate that. We've got a couple of minutes left. If anybody has any other questions for us, we can certainly take them at this time.
I just had one question. I was wondering, so in thinking about my daughter, and they said she probably is a year or two away from moving from SSI to SSDI. And her dad is also looking at retiring about that same time. So is it in her best interest? Can she decline moving benefits over to him? I guess what I've heard is like her benefit would go up if she moved under him once he retired, but it sounds like it might be better for her to keep earning work credits on her own and not make that move. And does she have that choice to not? I don't know if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So certainly you're correct with what you're saying, is that the benefits would likely go up. Of course, there's nothing that mandates that she would need to switch, but it would certainly be something where moving to a work record under her dad would give you the opportunity to start earning towards both getting enrolled in the Medicare system, as well as potentially getting more money without being bound by those asset and income limits. And that doesn't prevent her from earning those work credits either. So certainly it is a conversation that I would encourage you to have with a benefits specialist, because they're going to be able to dive into it a lot more than we can in the presentation. But it is possible, but it almost certainly would be something where you would really need to have a conversation about how it's going to be affecting not only potential for marriage, but also other benefits as she moves forward. And Stephenie or Nick, I don't know if you have other input on that one as well.
I can only speak from like my own experience here, but so at this point, is your daughter working?
Yes.
Okay.
She works part-time.
Okay. I think I may have said this when I was going through making a plan, but what usually happens with switching to SSDI, if you've got both a parent's benefit and your own work history, is that they split your benefit amount into two checks usually. I would agree with Nate that it's best to probably go and speak to a disability benefit specialist to explain all the ins and outs of that. So initially, I don't believe she would lose benefits. It's just if she were to get married, that's that crossroads that you want to think about. So because for me, my husband and I were together almost 4 years before we got married. And so during that last year and a half, I got a check from my work history under my father, and then I got my own work history. And it was only when I got married that I lost that check from my father's, under my father's name. So I know it's kind of a complicated system, but I would go talk to a disability benefit specialist about it so that you have all the information you need and you can build a timeline from there.
This is Nancy Aylar with a comment.
Sure.
My son about 15 years ago was told that his father had retired. We are divorced, and that he was on SSI at the time. And I asked whether or not he could stay on SSI because of all the paperwork involved in changing at that time. And they said no, that once the parent retires, you must switch from SSI to SSDI. That's what I remember being told back then.
Okay.
And just another word of warning that especially if you're not with the biological other parent anymore, we've had trouble twice where first when my husband retired and then when I retired, Social Security, for whatever reason, didn't follow their own rules. And they sent payments to my son from both my ex-husband and my Ssdi stuff, which is not what you're supposed to do, but Social Security did it. And then a while later, they came around and said, oh, we've paid you too much money. You now owe us money back. And in fact, just 3 months ago, we got a letter from them saying that my son owes them $12,000 because they did it a second time. And even though we talked to people both in SSI national and local, no one seemed to tumble to the fact that they were paying us against their own rules. And we had no way of knowing that. But our disability benefits specialist spotted it right away. And otherwise it would have gone on longer. So I think all this advice about seeing a disability or a benefit specialist is very good. They're very helpful.
Yeah, they really, really are. They've saved my butt more than once, because you're right. Benefits are very, very complicated, and things can happen that you had no idea were possible. And it's very complicated and very easy to make a mistake, or for them to make a mistake and not realize it. So talking to an expert is your best first move.
So Stephenie, this is Edward. On that note, I work right now and I have a partner and we have a child together, and I got a benefit from my father, but I had enough work credits to earn my Ssdi. So if me and my partner would get married, would I lose that? My dad retired in 2009, but I earned enough work credits to get the Ssdi. So
well, does your partner also have a disability?
she does, but she's not on disability anymore. So
Okay. You wouldn't lose the benefit, as far as I understand it, you wouldn't lose the benefit that's under your own name, but you could lose the benefit that is under your father's name.
and
So-
then the second part of my question is,
Sure.
the judge, because when we're going for custody of my child, we both have 50-50. The judge was saying, well, your daughter could be eligible for like a work credit or a child credit through your work, but I don't earn enough yet for that. But when would I know if I earn enough or something like that?
I don't know the answer to myself, but that would be another question to ask, I think, a disability benefit specialist or supportive staff there to get you on the right path and get a plan going for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem, Edward.
The other thing I would mention, Edward, is if you haven't, contact the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. That may be something too, where a work incentive benefit specialist would want to get involved to help you figure out some of that with the child care credits. But certainly your disability benefit specialist would be the best place to start. Right. Any other questions we have? I think we're just about at time here, but if there's any last questions that we can take for anybody.
I have a question about the Medicaid lien that can be against your spouse. So what makes that happen? Like, is it because you went to the doctor too much, or?
So the Medicaid liens are fairly complicated as far as what can trigger them, and it can be a variety of different things. The most common situation where you're going to see one get assessed would be as part of like a long-term care situation. So if you have a spouse that is on benefits and then would be using a long-term care, recovery facility, for example, if they had an injury and needed to go through rehabilitation, or if they were in a nursing care facility or some other type of long-term care facility where they're going to be accruing a large cost very quickly over time, or if they are using a service frequently. Sometimes when you're talking about care that requires the long-term use of durable medical equipment, it can trigger things like that. The liens are such a difficult area to really get into because there's different things that will trigger them, different things that won't trigger them, ways to work around them. But most of the time when you see a lien, it will be based on some type of long-term care where it's going to exceed the amount that Medicaid would fund, either like I was mentioning through a facility or sometimes through like an in-home nursing care service. Is a lot of times where you might see a lien assessed as well. And then what makes them difficult is they don't trigger until after the person receiving them has passed away. Then the lien is assessed against the surviving spouse. So with that, really, the best thing to do is if you are receiving or utilizing Medicaid, or if you have a family member that's utilizing Medicaid, would to just be consult with different providers, especially the Disability Rights Wisconsin has folks that specialize in medical concerns, as far as whether that be like Medicare, prescription coverage, Medicaid questions. They would be able to help with some of those type of questions and identifying those areas for what can trigger a lien, as well as ways to help prevent that lien from coming into effect.
Okay, because I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Mhm.
So that's basically where all of your ligaments are too long and your body dislocates for fundies because it feels like it. So I don't, want to leave behind, I don't want to put him in debt if we get married or anything like that. So
Yeah, certainly can understand that, and that's where I would encourage you to reach out to Disability Rights Wisconsin, to some of their folks there, as well as, again, as we've been saying this whole presentation, use your local ADRC, use the information assistance specialist and the benefit specialist there. Those things change so often. I've been out of the benefits world for 2 years already, and I feel like I'm already in over my head at this point. So keeping in contact with those folks will really be able to help you identify those areas.
Yeah, and they can also give you a breakdown of your benefits, like the benefits assessments over time. So if you're working on things and you want to change things, they can give you a better idea of what that's going to look like long term and how that's going to affect your benefits long term. And Disability Rights Wisconsin is a great resource too. Thanks, Nathan. I forgot about that one.
And I see we got another question that came in the chat from Carrie, asking if you keep your work credits when you move from Ssdi or Ssdi under your own name to Ssdi or the CBD benefits or CDB benefits, and then back to Ssdi. So as far as the work credits go, Carrie, you maintain those no matter what. Once you've earned them, they don't take them away from you. So they just accrue over time until you hit a point where the number of credits you have puts you in qualification for benefits. So yes, they'll track and follow throughout that time. If you're switching between SSI or SSDI, anything else like that, they'll be maintained. Any other questions anybody has for Stephenie, Nick, or myself?
Oh, I do
See, we have another one that popped up.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Stephenie.
Oh, I was gonna say, I do see another one there in the chat. Okay. Oh, good, Brittany. I'm glad it was helpful. Wonderful. And Carrie says, does someone earn work credits under CBD?
So as far as that goes, you don't earn work credits if you're receiving just by receiving the childhood disability benefits. But if you are working during that time, you receive the benefits or the work credits the same way. I don't remember the exact formulation because it's changed, I believe, since I've been out of the benefits world. But you accrue a certain amount of credits for how much you earn on a yearly basis. And so you can earn up to a certain number of credits every year. And that's affected by how many hours you work and how much money you make. But whatever type of benefit you are using, it doesn't affect your ability to earn those credits. You just are able to continue accruing them as you work and as you earn money. Anybody else have any other questions for us at all?
All right. Well, we are a little over time, so we should probably wrap this up here, but do check on the conference website for both the MAP postcard handout, and I believe there should be a postcard handout that outlines the benefits and penalties chart that we had in the presentation. And thank you for coming. This was wonderful. It's great to speak to everyone.
Yes, thank you everybody for joining us today. We appreciate the opportunity to share our personal experiences with everybody, and hopefully we've been able to help